So I was born to two immigrant parents. My dad came from Cuba in the 1980s, and my mom came from Honduras in the early 1990s. They met, and a few years later, I was born. Born premature. My mom told me about how basically I was good chance I probably wouldn't have made it through that birth, but luckily it went out without a hitch. And here I am today. But I really want to kind of focus on my dad at first. So my dad was an ex-vet. He was a very hard man, very money-driven, very workaholic, you know. I don't have much recollection from when I was a kid. Most of that time, very much are glimpses, into the past whenever we would go to a winter festival down back in Florida or, a family event. I never really had much connection with him, to be fair. Like, he was still my dad. And growing up, he was the guy who put food on the table. He was the guy who would take us to see my grandpa, to see my grandma, to see my uncles and my cousins and my family friends and such. I was born the first of three kids. I had two brothers. My middle brother, who was born a few years later, and my little brother was born several years after. I was always the quiet kid of the family. Never really went out much in terms of going to make friends. I never really had good connections with kids. And basically, I fell by the wayside in terms of social experience. Doesn't help. I'm also, neurodivergent, so that does have a bit of factor on it. But I remember like growing up how I would kind of fantasize about the games I played growing up, whether it be Sonic or any other shit I grew up with. But to continue going on, my mom was basically the person I saw most of the time. She was always there in the morning, she was always there at night, she was always there in the afternoon, pick us up after school. If I passed out in school while in elementary school, she would come and pick me up while I was asleep and bring me home where I would feel like nothing would happen. She was always my guardian angel. And come, I want to say early 2015, I start questioning certain beliefs that I had. I was born in a Southern Baptist family in the Deep South, so I very much had experiences that were very coddled in terms of what I've experienced. And I had recently gotten my first smartphone. And with that, I had basically started discovering, like, oh, well, there's several people who enjoy games I like. And during that time, Undertale was releasing, and I was huge into that at the time. Really good game, of course. And I started joining the Discord communities for that. I joined one of their official Discords, and I met my first experience with another trans person. Of course, I didn't know I was trans at the time. I was very much questioning everything I knew and believed in, and I was very confused by the concept. I didn't understand it. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I thought that they were damaging themselves, and it was very much a surreal experience to talk about to someone. Around that time is the time, Caitlyn Jenner came out, and my dad had sat me down with my 2 brothers, and I remember these words very vividly, like, "These people, they lie to themselves. They are nothing but lying to themselves and believing Satan's lies. They are no good than any other homosexual. They are no good than any other transvestite. They are just these sinful abominations. They hate themselves so much that they would rather live a fantasy than live in reality." And hearing those words, they definitely left a mark. And come about 2016, I start realizing that, hey, maybe I'm not straight. Maybe I'm gay. Because at the time I was still thinking I was a boy. So I was like, oh well, maybe I'm gay. Maybe I just like dudes. And my mom would kind of notice shifts in my mood and stuff like that. And she always asked, like, hey, what's up? Is something going on? And of course, I was homeschooled at the time. I saw my mom every day. She would be my teacher, she would be my cook, she would be my caretaker. And I was like, no, I don't think anything's really wrong. I'm just like kind of out of it. Come to find out that sometime before summer, my mom had went through my phone and she read text I had with one trans person, and they thought I was being groomed. And they weren't. They were just a fellow minor. I was just asking them questions because I was curious. And I had mentioned in passing in those conversations how I thought I was gay. My family then approached me and said that we needed to have a talk. And they said that I couldn't use the internet. I couldn't be on there because it's too dangerous for someone like me. And how I'm being fed lies and being groomed and all this stuff. And they said that they were going to get me help and that they would take me to this church group. And of course, I was still in the church at the time. I still liked going to youth groups. I still liked seeing my friends that I made through there. So I was like, you know what? I'll just play along with it. Maybe it's nothing too serious. If only I had fucking listened to my inner voice. Around summertime, I was taken to a camp. I didn't know much about it. All I knew is that it was for other people struggling with the sin of homosexuality, as they said. I would later come to know that this was a conversion camp. Didn't know at the time, so I pretty much went along with it. and all of it's a blur, right? Like, when you're given such a traumatic experience at such a age, at a time in your life where you need to mature and grow, it really scars you. I remember glimpses of it, whether it be walking on hot coals as a testament to believe in the faith, or how they would dress us up in dresses and scream at us while calling us sissies and F slurs, and you get the whole idea. And then there was a few other things, like being whipped with rods whenever we were shown, explicit gay imagery and had sensations about it. And one I vividly remember was definitely being stuck in an ice bath. Well, yes, it was middle summer in the South. Being stuck in an ice bath for around 3 to 4 hours was a grueling experience that I it 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 gets to me, it really does. Sorry, fuck. That was about a whole week of hell that I've gone through. It felt more like 4 months than it felt like a whole week. I came back from that very much in a distraught state, and because of that, I had lost all faith in my family, within my mom. My brothers were told about where I went and how I was getting better. My dad would then approach me and saying, "I hope you've changed, as this was the hardest thing I had to do for you to make sure that you were safe." And I never trusted him from any other point past that. Come around 2016, where I go into public high school, right? I very much was a social outcast. I never really made too many friends. The friends that I did make, it was far and few between. My family had prevented me from getting any sort of technology in my own personal possession. No smartphone, no tablet, no laptop. But I had school, and because I had school in a fairly modern school, I had ways to reach out to my friends who most had thought I had passed away or that I had been fully cut off and truly will never come back. And, it's good to know that you have a community somewhere, right? It's the same way I feel about being here in VRChat. I like how I can have a community whether or not I'm truly integrated or not, but it was a very much tough time. Throughout these few years, I would end up dating older dudes because I need validation. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't a phony, that I wasn't some sissy, that I wasn't someone fake. I needed to know who I was, what I was. And at the time, I had fully come to revelation right after that whole conversion camp experience that I definitely wasn't gay. Well, not in the direct sense. I found out I was pansexual a little bit later on, but I had fully broken my egg and realized I was trans. And around this time, I had, basically started distancing myself from my family even more. And they would hear about how my brothers would spot me on a school computer. And I would get lectured to and told about how I'm doing nothing but ruining my life. And that if I continue doing this, there will be no salvation for someone like me. And that they're doing it all for the goodness of their own heart, how they love me, how they want me to feel safe. And unfortunately, I can't go to my family about this. How can I? You know, when you're thrown into a situation that you specifically are told that you can trust someone when they've purposely put you in a place where your trust is forever broken. It it destroys you. It breaks you. It it really does hurt because throughout this whole time, the only person I really had confided in for my feelings was my mom. And I don't know if she'll ever see this. I don't know if she ever will, but I'll get back to that point in a bit. But come my high school years, I'm on and off between connecting towards my friends, my folks, like making new friends, whether it be online or IRL. Never really much IRL, but I started trying to branch out myself. And my family had recently taken me to a Christian therapist to make sure that I was still within the correct means. Of course, when the Christian therapist kind of had an inkling of a thought that I might be autistic or have ADHD, my family shut that down. They don't think that someone like me would be impaired by what would be to them a developmental disorder, when, in reality, it explains quite a bit of why I have gone through such social distancing with both my own brothers and my family. But, what can you do? It was the South. And sure, it may have been 2017, but like, what can you do when your own family denies that vaccines are real or that someone with autism can function properly? Sorry, I'm just sneezing. So, is there anything you'd want to ask before I continue?
So you have the floor to go into as much detail as you'd like, but you don't have to if it's too much.
No, 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 it's fine. Let me discuss the ice bath. So, early in the morning, we're waking up from our bunks and told that we need to recognize that our faith has been wavering. And this is mostly a blur, so I'm kind of stringing things together. But they would pick some of us out for duties, whether it be manly or strengthening. And for those of us who are more feeble, they said that we needed a shock to our system. So, for those of us that were built very small, very skinny, we were brought into civic trials to prove our faith, prove that we can make it through such experiences, right? One of those was breaking the cold of sin, right? We were each submerged into basically complete ice water for 3 to 4 hours in intervals of taking a break every 2 hours to make sure we didn't die of hypothermia or that we didn't experience anything that would cause us to get a severe sickness where we would end up having to be driven to the hospital. And, whether or not the hospital recognizes what's going on or not, it's still legal stuff that they don't want to deal with. So when you step into such a thing while you're being told you are lying to yourself. You are nothing more than being a deceiver. You are being nothing but a vessel for the devil, while nothing but the cold inches through your skin, and you can't help but shiver. And you're told to stop shivering as you're screamed at, as you're shouted at, and told, "You gotta stop doing this, you fucking sissy. You gotta stop going on and shivering. Otherwise, we're gonna teach you more of a lesson." And some of the boys didn't fully grasp that they had to try as still as possible, and they would get hit with rods, they would get slapped with belts, they would get punched in the face. And seeing that, you can't not vividly recognize that when it comes to those poor kids from 14 to 16, that they have no one else to confide in. They can't confide in people around them because collaboration would get you even longer time in what is essentially not only solitary confinement, but freezing pain in the middle of the summer. Sure, you can get out and you could probably warm up real fast, but that doesn't beat them when you're pushed back in and you're nothing but submerged under cold water where your hair is dripping wet, or you're shivering from head to toe with feels like prickly needles being pinched your hands, your feet, your legs, chest. It's a feeling that you kind of never forget, and now I live in a more northern area, so it's something that I'm kinda coming accustomed to, but you can't ever forget that sensation of being a kid who lived their entire life in warm, humid summers and, hot winters, only to be thrown into the most freezing environment, even if it's just a giant pool with ice cubes. But the whole idea of cold and anger and rage these people just had. It's almost intoxicating with how vitriolic it is. I'm sorry. Fuck.
You're doing great.
Thank you. Thank you. Another thing, and this happened as like a first day trial, was a walk on hot coals. You've probably seen this thing done for like luau's on TV or in Asian cultures, but when you're purposely made to walk on coals as a test of faith, that if you believe in God and you make it to the other side, regardless of how burnt your feet are, you'll be fine. You'll make it through this okay. Where most of us would scoff at the idea of stepping on basically charring red wood, right? But unfortunately, we had to go with it. And this is one thing that I remember one of the boys, of the group, basically it was a trial by fire. And in a quite literal sense, most of us had scoffed at the idea of experiencing it. And one of the boys, 6'4", around that size, around 16, decides to run for the gate. And the gate was lined with very sharp razor wire. And he ends up cutting most of his arteries while trying to scale over it, and he was rushed to the hospital. We didn't get to see him again. We didn't know what happened. They just said, "Don't worry about him. He was weak."
Oh my God.
And it's ironic looking back to be told that's weak, and, it's some of the others went through less things to be able to make it through. He did his best to get out as soon as possible because he probably knew what was coming. Most of us had no other choice but to endure that living hell, you know? Every so often within the middle of the day, we would be taken to a counselor, and they would ask how we would feel, and I couldn't really explain myself. I just said, like, "I hope that I recover." I couldn't make out any words other than, "I hope I recover. I hope that my trust in God's faith can heal me." And I have nothing against Christians, right? I have several Christian friends. I know they aren't all bad people. Some of my best family friends, they're Christian, right? And they don't mean ill will. But to be confronted in a space where if you were to slip up would cause your punishment and punishment of those who are around you, you have to basically lie to save yourself. And this later on would come to bite me in the ass with my family, later not trusting anything I say because they found me to be a habitual liar from that point on. Which what can I do, you know? Like, how can I tell you the truth when last time you found out the truth, I got nothing but shame and anger and ridicule and then thrown to the wolves and hoped to man up, to come back a better person. How can you how can you tell them?
At this time, did you still consider yourself Christian or are you fully deprogrammed out of it?
During that whole event, I already had started questioning my beliefs about a year beforehand, but once I went through that experience, I basically had became a full atheist. I couldn't bear the idea of an organized religion.
Yeah.
Not that I hate Christians or anything, I do wanna make that clear. It's definitely something that changes you and changes how you see organizations like that and how they affect people. You could see that from nowadays, from what's going on with certain states in the US and how they're doing things with laws because religion mandates it and how things are becoming more fundamentalist. And it's scary because you think you escaped hell only to find out that was only the beginning and it's going to follow you for the rest of your life. How does one even cope with that? How do you how do you how do you how do you even go forward without realizing that what you do is essentially be part of the cycle where one kid realizes that their experiences are, their own and that their family does not agree with that. And whenever they start talking about it, only thing their family knows how to do is to try to fix them because it's always their fault, right? You know, I can't blame my mom for being confused, right? She didn't know if she did something wrong. She didn't know what would happen to me. My dad, on the other hand, he's a hard person, right? I've never really been too connected with my dad, as I've said before, but he approached me a few days after that, and he as I said earlier, "I hope you changed or else I can't go forward with you as a person," right? He's told me about how when he was younger in the early '80s, he would beat the shit out of queer people, right? Because they would either touch him or they would talk to him funny, and he would find that to be very, very frustrating, and that he could not do anything but hate himself for letting those people get to him, and hate that those people are taking advantage of those around them to support a lie. It's it's hard because I see that happening to my brothers where my middle brother, he's a very hot-headed kid, right? He grew up very hot-headed. He was the middle child. He always got the short end of the stick. I can't blame it, right? But it's sad to see family members that you grew up with, that you've seen since birth, turn into such vile individuals. How do you go forward with the idea of my family will never look at me the same way again, you know? But to wrap back to the experiences I had, I know some of the boys had talked about how they were shown certain videos of explicit gay activities. If they ever had sensations, they would be flogged with cane sticks and how they would be basically thrown to the side and said, "What are you? Why do you feel like that you need to be some disgrace to God?" And like I can't truly remember if I had experienced that. It's very hard to remember something like that. I can't even imagine how I could retain such memories without suppressing them fully, but there's probably a good chance it did happen, and it's probably why I'm so adverse to when people discuss beating the crap out of cross-dressers or people who are gender nonconforming, how I feel pent-up anxiety just go into my hands and my arms, and I feel nothing but shake and quiver at the thought of how defenseless I would be in that situation, just trying to express myself only for people to truly see nothing but an enemy. Sorry. Yeah.
We're okay. Is there anything I can do for you right now?
It's fine. I just need to get through this.
Okay. You're doing great.
Thank you. Is there anything you would want to know more about either what happened after or how I kind of coped past that? Like, I don't, it sounds hilarious when I say, do you want to know more about my trauma? But it's like, you know, it's something I got to talk about.
You know, I've sat here in this game next to over 100 people and heard about some of the worst shit humanity has ever experienced. I don't think I've ever been this shook. This is kind of fucking me up, dude. I'm
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing that you're still alive, to be frank.
Let's actually talk about that. So, throughout my time in high school, I had dealt with severe depression and anxiety. I had made some trans friends at high school. Even in Deep South, you'll always find someone. And while I wasn't completely 100% out at the time, I still knew of me, as a person, me as Jennifer and not my dead name self, right? And I remember talking to some of my friends about it. And, I had been coping by going to very, very toxic places, right? Whether it be 4chan or Reddit or some stuff like that, just a type of like circle jerk of self hate and self wallowing. Because when you go through an experience where you're traumatized and told you are nothing but a liar and a deceiver to yourself, you just kind of internalize that self hatred. I had ended up one night in my sophomore year falling myself to bed and trying to overdose on Benadryl, right? I was lucky enough where one of my friends online had catched that I had snuck a phone from school into my room, and nearly 50 people had reached out to me and saying, "You got this. Don't die on me. Don't lose this battle. You have to keep going." And that shit broke me. It did, to know that people, even people I hadn't talked to for a solid few months, right, would just come out and be so worried about me when all I could think was, I am nothing but a disgrace to my family, to my culture, to my entire well being. And I had ended up basically punching myself in the gut so hard where I threw up most of it and had ended up passing out in my bathroom until at least 10 in the morning. But, my parents hadn't suspected a thing because I had made precautions. If I was to leave this phone out, they can't find it. I'll put it in between some books. I'll make sure that it's as out of sight, out of mind as possible. And I had ended up throwing all over the bathroom floor and on my toilet, and it was a surreal scene, half dissolved pills and your own bile just mixed together and thinking, what the fuck have I been doing to myself? And this wasn't the end of any sort of experiences, right? This was just one of the ones that truly made me question where I was going and what I was doing. Come the end of sophomore year, one of my friends had ended up passing by their own hand. And I had started to make a promise to myself that if anything, I have to make it to 18. If my friends who are teenagers, they go on without me, right? I owe it to them to at least get to 18 and be like, "Hey guys, I did it. I made it. I'm here. I'm still going." And and here I am still. About to turn 21 in a month, eh? You know? It it's hard when all you can do is realize that there's so many friends that you had that you lost because people just couldn't see them for who they were. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. My sheer will and sheer determination has pretty much kept me going. The fact that I have done such accomplishments as moving out of Florida all by my own hand to a much better place, more welcoming place, supported by friends. It's a good feeling, but you can't help but feel like you could have done more in your time in this one chapter of my life. It hurts. And I made it to 18, all right. As soon as I turned 18, I moved in with my aunt, and it was a little bit better. Things got a little bit better. 2020 happened, and that was a year and a half. But I had started picking up trans activism at the time, and it became really, really useful as a way to help start coping with my emotions, to start being out there for those who are being attacked or being seen as the enemy. And of course, I couldn't stop everything. I was just a one person with only a group of few people, but I had started learning more and I had started trying to better myself. I had gotten on estrogen finally and I had done some attempts to move out, right? I had tried moving out with an ex, but within a week he dumped me and I had to move back, much to my family's dismay of abandoning them and trying not to tell them anything. Second time happened while I did move in with my most recent ex, and it was good for a few months, but it was in the middle of nowhere and I couldn't really find a job that easily. I had burned out most of my savings and had to move back. Luckily, this time it was more on a decent note with my family, but they had made it clear that if I'm to stay in Florida, there's two conditions. Either I get into college with my own money. Of course, I had none at the time, essentially, and I wasn't going to take out loans. I have a personal motive to never really go into debt or enlist. And going through these emotional train wrecks, I had considered enlisting several times. And I have no ill will to veterans, right? It's a system and it is a very manipulative system. If you know anything about recruiters or anything like that, you'll know that they will
Oh,
prey on
yeah.
those who are poor, who are mentally unwell, who are seeking a way out. And to be told by my family that I have no choice other than either I go out and become a drone, or I send myself into debt trying to figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life. These last few months, they had been very much turbulent, right? I have been dealing with, my family having to forbid me out of, while living in their own home and paying off my own car and everything, forbid using the Wi-Fi, that I can't use my own phone in my own house, and that I can't even have my computer set up. Luckily now I'm in a better place in VR now again, so that's great. But it was really frustrating to be in a situation where you're reliving your own childhood, your own teenage years, and you felt like you've never escaped. So I had been talking to quite a few friends that are in the Pacific Northwest region, right? And I had made the decision that fuck it, I'm going. I'm not looking back. I had bought some bags, I packed up my PC, I packed up most of my clothes, most of my accessories, my little doodads and knickknacks, and on October the 3rd, while saying to my parents, "Oh, I'm gonna be late at work," because I work usually late nights, I had went to the airport of Tampa, I checked into my flight, never looked back.
Fuck yeah.
Now here I am in my new chapter of my life, but it still haunts me, it really does, especially with my mom. My family isn't the best, right? Like, a few months beforehand, my brother beat the shit out of me saying that I would never make it in the military. Was on the floor bloody, my nose was fucked up, I was basically curb stomped into the side of my mom's bed frame, right? I know he's a fucked up guy, right? I can't fully blame him for being an awful individual, but I can't respect someone like that who would just throw someone who is much more shorter, much lighter, much physically weaker, especially since I had been doing estrogen for about 8 months at that time while undercover. And my family had prevented me from even going to the cops about it because it would be too much work and too much issues brought to me and him enlisting. He's now fully graduated from Air Force boot camp, good for him, I guess. But I personally had no respect for him past that point. My little brother, I'll give him this, right? He's a good kid, right? He's a little fuck boy in high school. He's huge into all his music artists. He likes to make album arts as a little fun hobby, and I'll say this, he's a good kid, right? If a bit misguided, but he has a good life ahead of him. He's always been the baby child, and I'll say that, "Hey, bro, listen, I hope you're doing good. I hope you're doing well. If you ever come across this video, I really doubt you will, but I know we never really connected much, but hey, I hope you're doing good, bro. That's all I can really wish for you." It's weird because it's something that you don't really recognize until you finally have gone fully away, no contact, no nothing. It really hurts the most with my mom. She was always the one who was there for me. She was always the one who would take care of me, who would go behind my dad's back to help me with either getting a job, with getting whatever I wanted for Christmas, with getting a new console after 4 years of using an Xbox 360 in the early 2010s. She was always the one to make it happen, and I abandoned her. I had no choice, but I abandoned my mom, and it really, really does hurt because she was the one who was really there for me. The day I left, I hugged her so tight, I said, like, "I'm gonna be home late. I love you. Good luck with" my brother had a swim meet at the time, my younger brother. "Good luck with the swim meet. I hope to see you later." Let me grab my phone so as I can tell you the last message I sent to her, 'cause this is where it's gonna get me. I sent her an email at 3 a.m. on October the 8th. "I'm safe. Hey, mom. I'm leaving for a safe place. I'll reach out to you if I want to be in contact. I wish you very well. I love you." Right? Because I don't wanna give her too much information, but I really didn't wanna just leave her to the idea that I may have just gone away and never would have come back. Her message to me: "I don't get it. You're in a safe place. You used our safe place to go to who knows where. You know that's not such a safe place wherever you are. It saddens me that you lied to yourself and to us, and it breaks my heart. I hope that you are not being used and that you will make good decisions about destroying your life. God bless you, child." I wish I could just call her, tell her that I really had no choice and I had to do this for myself. How can I tell her?
You
I've
did the
gone
right
through
thing.
I know, but I've gone through so much shit. How can I tell her what I've gone through without her being like, "Well, it was for the better. It was for the better of you." Was trauma for the better of me? Was depression, suicidal thoughts, was all of that worth it? Was all of that worth keeping a son who never really existed? I don't hate her. I never will. She was bought in by our culture's sake of machismo. She was bought in by my father's very conservative views and very moralistic views. I became the person I am today because of all of the shit I've gone through. And while I was not a perfect person, I'm far from it. All I hope is that some poor kid out there doesn't feel the exact same shit I went through because I know too many kids that have gone through some same shit. From going through a literal conversion camp to getting groomed by older men because you wanted validation for being like a girl, that you wanted to truly feel authentic and not feel like some emasculated piece of shit, and to feel that you are loved, to lie, to go through so much just to maintain your sanity and to maintain structure. What can you do, you know? All I just wish is that whoever watches this, right? If you're going through something, if you're going through such traumas, if you've experienced such living hell, you aren't alone. I can promise you're not alone because I know I'm not, and I want you to know that you're not alone too. Doesn't matter if you're cis, trans, black, Latino, Asian, white, doesn't matter what. As long as you have good morals and good determination, you will make it through it. I promise you. because I sure did, and I left everything I knew behind. Whether or not I truly feel like it was worth it is yet to be told, but I I'm doing better. Got a lot of shit to work through. Got a lot of feelings that I can't describe into word, that I can't put into a notepad, but I still made it. I've closed that chapter of my life, and whether or not you know, whether or not I maintain a place, whether or not I get a good job, whether or not I have a home or not, I made it. So can you. And mom, I'm sorry. I love you. I really do. Your child still is here, and she loves you. She always will, regardless of whether or not you believe her to exist. She is here, and she will never forget what you've done for her.
Tell me a story, I wanna hear it. You might think it's boring, but I'm interested.